Welcome back to another episode of TheWorryWartGamer. If you don't think that there's a real concerted effort behind the scenes to change every and any aspect of content that we get to degrade the narrative experience, and you don't think that certain developers or certain companies would even consider it, then this story may shock you. Behind the scenes when it comes to one of the most beloved franchises, behind the scenes when it comes to one of the most beloved developers, yes, the suits are trying to change everything and make content watered down, make narrative experiences completely and totally weak. It is not a priority. Let's get into this article and then we'll talk about it. Capcom originally wanted Resident Evil 7 Biohazard to be a live service game with online multiplayer and microtransactions, its executive producer has revealed in a new discussion with Shinji Mikami. On the official Biohazard YouTube channel, Yoon Takeuchi explained how Capcom was putting pressure on the development team to implement such features in the game until Takeuchi was asked to join the project and scrapped those plans. Quote, "When we started working on Resident Evil 7, we went back to that what is horror anyway discussion," Takeuchi explained. "I talked about it a lot with Resident Evil 7 director Koshi Nakanishi. So what are we going to do? We talk about that stuff even before started work on Resident Evil 7. And right around that time, there was a big push at Capcom, a big marketing push, saying we have to make the games players are asking for. So we were being told, make this, make that. It was really hard on the director at the time. Online multiplayer this, downloadable content that. Ongoing service games, microtransactions, make a Resident Evil game that ticks all those boxes. There were so many demands, those poor directors. Finally, our president, Tsushimoto, stepped in. He'd heard about all the unsuccessful attempts at that point, so this is one of those unforgettable moments for me. Quote, "It was January 4th, the first working day of the new year. The president called me to his office. Resident Evil 7 is in pretty bad shape. Takeuchi stepped in and helped make it. So that's how I ended up working on Resident Evil 7. Takeuchi explained that when he joined the team, he pushed to enlist Nakanishi as the game's director, then set about trying to remove the live service and microtransaction features Capcom was trying to implement. First, we decided that Resident Evil's roots are in horror. We talked about it a lot. The idea of multiplayer got killed off pretty quickly. If we could properly put it together, we could make an exciting horror multiplayer game, but we didn't really have any good ideas, so we set it aside. We went down the list, chopping them out, until we had marketing's worst nightmare, a regular old single-player horror game. That's what we ended up with. The result was an overwhelming critical success, earning a score of 87 on review aggregation site Metacritic. In June, Resident Evil 7, along with the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3, received current-gen upgrades for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. So when you hear all that behind the scenes, the people in charge of these companies, these huge franchises that have such goodwill, fans throughout the world, they don't care about the longevity of it. They don't care about the history of it. They don't care about furthering story or characters. They say to the developers, chase the trend, give gamers what they're asking for. Clearly, they didn't know what gamers were asking for. They wanted the developers internally to believe that because they wanted something that would perpetually print them money. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's finished. Just get it out. Put stuff in there that we can monetize over and over and over again. Run the franchise into the ground, and then we'll worry about it later. Clearly, they were wrong because the developers internally fought back, and guess what gamers wanted? They wanted Resident Evil 7. It was a huge success. All of a sudden, internally, the suits in charge, well, they love Resident Evil now, right? Let's go back and take Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 and remake them because it's all about the stories and the characters now, isn't it? And it led to Resident Evil Village, which has DLC coming, adding back in third-person mode because, again, they really care about the history of Resident Evil now that it's making them money. This is a franchise, this is a legacy IP that was almost destroyed internally by the very people that created it, by the very people that hold it dear, the people in charge of it. Almost destroyed it. And if you don't think that's a sign that every one of these companies don't care about narrative and just want to chase these trends, I don't know what to tell you. Here's the good news. When you think about narrative, when you think about stories and characters and what they can do for a brand and a platform, look no further than one of the biggest proponents of live service games, Microsoft. When they reviewed The Last of Us 2 internally, they did not want these internal documents to release. What did they say? Now, keep in mind, this is not me. This is not my opinion. This is straight from the mouth of Microsoft and Xbox on Last of Us 2. Quote, "While narrative chapters may not be what many gamers are expecting, they are exceptionally well done and really show what other games, especially narrative adventure games, should be aspiring to accomplish with their character dialogue, presentation, and voice acting. On the lack of choice because it's a narrative-driven game, quote, that the player doesn't have the ability to greatly influence or determine the outcome of the narrative might prove antithetical to many players and how they view their role in the video game experience. However, we would argue, Microsoft, Xbox, would argue that not every video game must be about the player role-playing their character's story. On the visuals, quote, the visual quality and attention to detail in The Last of Us Part 2 is absolutely best in class in basically every area, and the overall presentation is significantly ahead of anything that the other teams have been producing on console and PC. I've been saying this for a long time. The experiences that push the industry forward when it comes to presentation and narrative is always on console. It's not on PC. You can take those games, you can put them on your PC, you can raise the frame rate and the resolution, but Microsoft themselves and Xbox say that it is ahead of anything that other teams have been producing on console and PC. Why is this important? Because if the biggest proponent of live service, of half-finished games, get them out, make your own story. We don't need to create characters and stories. Just run around with your friends, buy some skins. If the biggest proponent of that recognizes how important and how impactful narrative-driven experiences are, then there's hope. A perfect example of this is Fortnite. When it first released, the biggest differentiator between it and just every other shooter running around shooting people, battle royale, buy some skins so that you feel like characters from other franchises are running around. The biggest differentiator was the fact that you can build. And what did they do? They took out the build feature, and now it's just like everything else, but somehow everyone loves it. Everyone is being funneled into these feedback loops that last a few months to a few years, and then you're looking for the next thing. You don't remember anything about them. They don't have meaning. They don't have substance. They don't have characters that travel with you from one generation to the next, from one platform to the next. And if this continues, experiences that really matter are going to degrade to the point where the entire industry becomes the shooter box. Do you remember that stigma that Microsoft and Xbox used to have? The shooter box. They had no experiences other than shooters. Now we're pushing for nothing else other than live service games. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. I do think that Sony understands they need to do both. They do it better than anyone else. And if Microsoft themselves, the king of pushing this service-based content released unfinished, microtransactions, if they recognize how great and how impactful single-player games are, if they recognize that on console, if you do the work, you can create something that rivals the best on PC, then there is hope. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Thanks for watching the video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.